Well, here we are back here again, another episode, Get to Know Your Wedding Pro. We have Brianna Parks here today, part down in California and then part up in Washington, elopement photographer here, kind of a unique. I like that kind of spreading our web here. We do a little Oregon, we do a little Spokane, but you specialize both in California and in the Pacific Northwest. So that'll be good. Brianna, why don't you introduce yourself? Who are you?
Hi, my name is Brianna. I am an elopement photographer. I actually am based in Redding, California, which is up north. But like Reed said, I specialize in both Washington and Northern California, just kind of the whole Pacific Northwest in general. But those are kind of my two areas of expertise. I really love Olympic National Park and Redwood National Park are kind of my two hot spots that I absolutely love and adore. And I've been doing this for about 6 years and just absolutely love every aspect of it.
And you said so that when you're not in California, you're kind of more up in the Port Angeles area?
Yeah, correct. So I usually spend the summers in the Port Angeles area just because it is so popular up there in the summer times. I mean, Washington in the summer is just unbeatable. It's absolutely gorgeous.
We get a lot of that because I deal in my other stuff, a lot of online, and yeah, you get a lot of this hate of Seattle and oh, it's so rainy and it's. I mean, I'm sitting outside here today, but yeah, I mean, we really do. If you tough it out for the 8 9 months, you really do get it pans out here in the summertime. Do you feel that way?
Yeah, oh, for sure. And I don't even mind the rain. I think it's more so just the overcast, not being able to see the sun for days at a time, where I'm just like, oh, I don't know if I could stay here in the winters for the very long. I think I need the sun a little bit.
In terms of shooting between California and Washington, I assume different scenery, kind of different vibe in that way. How do you kind of meld the two, or do you see similarities in both kind of locations? Because at least from my perspective, I think the Olympic is different than Northern California, but maybe it's not.
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say, I mean, the similarities in terms of Olympic and the Redwoods specifically are pretty similar. Like the climate is pretty similar, pretty overcast in both areas. I would say the biggest challenge with Olympic is probably just the midday sun. If you're at a place like Hurricane Ridge, where you're kind of at a higher elevation, you have the sun. But I love both places for different reasons. I think Olympic is so incredibly diverse, and you can kind of see everything the Pacific Northwest is known for in that specific park. And then I love the Redwoods because it's so remote and not really a big hotspot for elopement, surprisingly. So I love when couples are willing to kind of go off the beaten path. I mean, you have to kind of travel a lot to get to the Redwoods. So couples that are down to go to the Redwoods are some of my favorite couples because they're so just go with the flow and chill.
I guess that's interesting because obviously I do videography, and for a while I really thought that was going to take off, like the elopement video. And there's some here that do tremendous, and I was really trying to kind of ease into that for a while, and kind of ended up letting it go to those more experts. But do you find just in terms of like, has that always been your specialty? Is that something you kind of like leaned into? How do you feel like where you want to brand yourself as kind of an elopement photographer?
Yeah, so I actually started shooting big weddings. I did like a few portrait sessions. I just didn't really like it. And someone on Facebook found me and just asked me to photograph their wedding. So I did it. I think I made like $300. I thought I was, raking in the dough. But I did that for about 2 years before I finally discovered elopements. And I decided to fully make the switch in 2020, which was actually the perfect year to do so. It was right before the pandemic happened and everything shut down. So it was like, I mean, I feel like it was kind of a blessing in disguise for my business because I switched right at the right moment. So I started photographing elopements in 2020, and then I just kind of stuck with it. I love elopements. I've never gone back to big weddings or shooting anything else. And I think in 2020 we saw a ton of photographers and videographers, get into the elopement space because all of their big weddings were canceled. So what else are you going to do? And I think we're seeing a lot of them start to taper off now, but like I said, will never go back to big weddings. I love the whole elopement niche, and it's everything that I love. Just, my personality fits perfectly in with my work, and it's just perfect. I don't know what other word to use.
Well, I think I like it a lot, and I get, I feel I get some more intimate with the couple, right? You just deal with that, and you're not dealing with, the 18 family members standing. Okay, we're trying to get photos.
Yeah.
Can I get myself a photo? Okay, no, you're gonna get the photos. Okay, we don't want to deal with that. But like, it's interesting because like I said, we did a wedding planning podcast all during COVID, talking about different COVID restrictions and kind of all that different stuff. And yeah, like the tiny wedding, like that was going to be the big thing, or the micro wedding, I think is what they called it. And at least in my world, like, and the same with corporate. I think it was a lot of like, oh, it's all going to be remote. And then like the second you could do a big conference again with 1,000 people, it's like, we're doing that. And the
Yeah.
second you felt like you could do big weddings again, I feel like I went back to that. But it's good to, I mean, and obviously elopements existed before COVID, but it's good to see that exists still, because it felt like I said, as soon as people could, a lot of people wanted that, they could still go back and do the big one. So it's good that the other, I guess, line has continued in that way.
Yeah, and it was kind of a blessing too, because I think a lot of couples didn't really know eloping was an option, or they thought, I don't know, they just they couldn't get married, they had to wait a few years. And so I think when COVID happened, a lot of couples were able to see, okay, we have options now. We don't have to just choose the big wedding. We don't just have to choose to have an elopement. And so I think COVID really allowed couples options, and it allowed the market to kind of explode in a way in terms of weddings. And I think nowadays too, I see a lot of couples mixing. So I have a lot of couples that will come elope and then they'll go home and do like a big open house reception style with their friends and family. So they're kind of getting the best of both worlds, which I think is so brilliant. I wish that was around when I was getting married.
Yeah, I think COVID, I think you're right, definitely kind of opened up to like, okay, you don't necessarily have to do all these 100 things for your wedding to be a wedding. You know, you can kind of pick and choose. Like, it's so weird. And even the elopement thing, like the whole like, oh, you're going to go elope in Vegas, or like, I don't know, it's always seems like it's kind of had this weird, like, even my brother's wedding planning right now. And my mom's like, well, I don't know. I think they might have a small wedding. I'm like, that's kind of a normal thing now. Like, it's not
Yeah.
every, and like even my wife and I didn't have like we had like 100 people, but it wasn't like we had this big, 300 person affair. But it's becoming more of that standard. And I think even with people like working and realizing like, if I'm ever going to be able to afford a house, if I'm ever going to be able to do this, maybe I don't want to, buy fish fillet for 200 guests at my
Yeah.
wedding. Like maybe I want to go do you find that as well? Is it, because obviously there's the lifestyle choice and the like, okay, we want the really style, beautiful photos out, whatever. But also, obviously, it's like we're trying to save money in some of these ways as well.
Yeah, I would say honestly, a majority of my couples are trying to save money, or they want to spend their money on a different kind of experience where, like you said, I mean, couples who have a big wedding tend to want to spend a ton of money on the decorations and the food and the music and all of these things that are kind of there to help entertain the guests, versus couples who want to elope tend to invest their money in experiences that are kind of centered around them and their day. And a lot of my couples too combine their honeymoon and their elopement in one. So I get a ton of couples coming from the East Coast that have never been to the Pacific
Mhm.
Northwest before. So they come out here, they elope, and then they do like a 2 week long road trip, just kind of to see everything the Pacific Northwest has to offer. That way they're not spending money on, 100 plate dinners for a person, and they're actually doing it to go out to dinner, them two, or go see a national park that they've always wanted to see. So
Yeah, I remember when one of my wife's friends got married and I was doing video. I just kind of started getting into wedding stuff enough where I could like say that I did it. And yeah, after like they didn't have a videographer, and she's like, yeah, we really needed those chairs, I guess, at the time. And like I couldn't tell you what those chairs look like, but I knew that they were really expensive. And like when we were planning, like that's what I wanted. And then now, 2, 3 years later, it's like, why the heck did we, do all that? Do you? Is there a type? Is it, because obviously there's a lot of like, we're hiking in the mountains, we're doing, the sunrise. Like I've done a couple of those, like, okay, we go out, right,
yeah.
a buck early in the morning. But is that the only people that do it? Or obviously there's certain like non-adventurous types, or kind of how do you view all that?
Oh yeah, there are so many couples. There are super adventurous couples who want to do backpacking and helicopter tours and, the whole 9 yards. And then there are other couples who are wanting to invite friends and family, but they don't want to hike. They're not super adventurous. They kind of just want to go see what the Pacific Northwest is like without having to hike up a mountain. So in that case, we just go to drive up accessible locations. Like, I mean, that's what I love about this whole niche, is you can really make it as personalized as you want, where you can do as much hiking as you want, or you can do no hiking. So it's really up to the couple and like what they prefer and their personalities.
Do you find, and you were talking before with some hotspot, locations to go to, that you have to fight? Like, there are other people there? Are you good at finding other? I never, because again, I don't. This really is outside of my norm of like we
Yeah.
do the pretty standard like barn wedding, whatever. But like, are you having to continually find new locations? Or are you fighting with other people going to be there?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'm very hands-on in the process in terms of helping my couples. So I always make them location lists with locations I think they would love. I use a ton of different questionnaires to kind of get to know them and what they're kind of envisioning for a ceremony location. I always like to provide them with, 50% locations that are those more popular spots you might see online if you look up things to do in Olympic National Park versus the other 50% of the locations I suggest are very much hidden gem, off beaten path locations. I kind of tend to steer clear from locations that I know I'm going to find 110 other photographers at. Like Gold Creek Pond is a really big one, kind of in the Seattle area. And then Artist Point up by Mount Baker is super popular. So I kind of, if couples really want to go there, I just kind of let them know beforehand, hey, there's probably going to be other couples up there. There's going to be a lot of people. So I just like to prepare them as much as possible. But I do try to find locations where you're not going to find a ton of people.
Is there, and obviously with every wedding, and I'm asking dumb questions, but this I think at least fills out the conversation more. But um, you run a venue, right? Okay, we kind of got there's the parameters here. I mean, do you have to kind of have them like apprised of like, now we're going to be out. We might not always be able to control all this or the lighting, or if it's going to be overcast or the rain. Like, what kind of prep do they go into knowing just, hey, like it is kind of TBD until we get out there what it's going to look like?
Oh, yeah. So the very first initial call, right when I get on the call with them to meet them, like I prep them for everything. So I let them know we're in the Pacific Northwest. The weather here is not super stable all of the time. So we might run into weather. We usually plan, the actual elopement day to be during a good season. But if it's not, we have options. I always like to say bring clear umbrellas or, different props like a blanket that you can use that looks good in pictures. But yeah, I always just try to let them know. I also send them example galleries too of elopements that I have shot in the rain. And I think when couples kind of see, oh, look, the light was even the whole entire day and the colors are really pretty, it makes them excited and be like, oh, well, I kind of hope it rains on my wedding day. So, and I think too, couples who elope, they kind of know, like, we're going to be outdoors. They just kind of know, okay, I can't wear heels. I need to kind of wear dresses that aren't going to get caught on everything or something that I don't mind getting dirty in. So, yeah, I think preparation is just key. Let them know beforehand so they don't show up and they're not surprised the day of.
Well, and it's funny because you say that, right? And like, okay, well, make sure you dress, but like we'll even get that. I remember we had a wedding, and they were not the happiest of couples, but like, it was private land. They were on the beach, and it was just like, oh my God, the sand is everywhere. It's like, you're getting married on the beach here. Like, this is what we
Yeah.
do. So I mean, but that's good. I mean, even as much prep, like, you even get them no matter what wedding, like, oh, I didn't want my dress to get dirty or whatever. Like, okay, but like, we're living in the world today. Like, we're trying to get through and do this.
Yeah, and I still get that to this day sometimes where I'll get on the phone with a couple and they'll be like, "Okay, well, how do I keep my clothes from looking nice all day when we're going to a beach in March?" Like, you can't.
Yeah.
You can't. I mean, there are ways to kind of mitigate it, but I think, if you're trying to keep everything clean, maybe an outdoor elopement isn't the right kind of wedding for you to have. Let's maybe explore other options to see how we can kind of make this work.
Have you had to, I guess, talk about maybe a little of your branding in terms of what you've had to do to kind of cater to that, and then I want to separately talk about being able to kind of, look in Seattle and California, but just in general, kind of your brand and just, targeting that specific, clientele or niche. Like, what have you done specifically?
Yeah, so I think if you go on my website and just kind of read through my copy, it's very much telling couples that they can have this once in a lifetime experience. Like I said, I do kind of target couples a lot that are coming from the East Coast and that have never seen the Pacific Northwest before. And so I'm really trying to attract couples that are maybe on the fence of whether or not they want to elope, but they kind of see my images and are just like, this is what I want. Like, this is the feeling I want on my wedding day. I want to feel like a super tiny person in this big, massive landscape. So I really kind of focus that with my copy and then just my colors too. Like I tend to gravitate towards earthy colors that kind of symbolize, being outdoors, hiking, earth, mountains, all of that fun stuff.
Do you find the stress level when it's just when it's let me get that back here, when it's just you, the couple, kind of be able to do all that? Because I lived through that when we did COVID, and we had a lot of like, we were just streaming the wedding or a little ceremony, or we were doing whatever, and a lot of couples like, oh, this was about as much as I could handle, right? Like, if we had to do a full scale wedding, like that might have been too. Do you find the stress level you're able to mitigate that, and it ends up being better too?
Oh, yeah, and I mean, I even after the big day, couples are always like, "That was so I mean, I had no stress. Like that was such an enjoyable experience. And even like I just shot my brother's wedding a few weeks ago and he had a bigger wedding. So it was kind of like I was thrown out of my element a little bit and it was so different. I mean, even just the stress level of having just a few family members there, um, it was completely different versus like an elopement where there are barely any guests. So it was like a complete night and day shift. But yeah, a lot of couples just, I think at the beginning when you start planning, and this goes for big weddings and elopements, but you're kind of like, where do I start? How do I begin? And there's a little bit of stress there. But when the actual day comes and it's over with, I mean, couples are just like, that was so enjoyable. I loved it. Like I had no stress.
Well, congrats on your brother. Yeah, that's funny. Like I said, yeah, they're planning, my brother and I guess future sister-in-law, and like it is so weird. Like, and people want different, and we finally, so they're looking at venues and kind of all this stuff, and I think they want to ask me, but not offend me because it's maybe not what I do or not what we did when we got married.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't care, but it is funny, just even that, like how different and like they're looking at places like really like they like Annie wants to get married there, like that's great, it's just totally different than what you would expect, but it is funny, so congrats on that. But yeah, kind of go into the different element of what he wants versus what, maybe what you did or what you do.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, like, I don't know. I think big weddings are so fun for certain couples. And there's like so much you can do. I think, I mean, even because of COVID too, I mean, you see venues that just like completely skyrocket their prices. And so it's a whole different world. Like I can't even, it's so hard to break down the differences because I think they're so drastically different from each other.
That's a good. Let's talk about that because I still want to do the Washington, California thing. But yeah, in terms of money saving to do the elopement, and God bless, and I have lots of friends that own venues and run venues and have managed venues and all that. But like being able to save 7, 8, 9, 10,000 on a venue rental alone, let alone kind of everything else of
Yeah.
okay, we're feeding 100 people, okay, we got to get all these chairs, and so like, you talk about just the cost savings of that, and just kind of like I guess what when you do the elopement, like maybe like are they getting hair and makeup with someone? I know we have hair and makeup people that kind of do that elopement stuff as well. Like what kinds of things do they have to handle when they're doing the elopements?
Yeah, so I think most of my couples will do like hair and makeup, florals, and then I mean that's kind of it unless they wanted to do a full-on experience. So like sometimes couples in Alaska will do like helicopter tours. I think a lot of couples are now hiring like a private chef or a catering company to come in and do like a private dinner with their friends and family to kind of end the night off. But I mean, couples really only spend, I would say, like $10,000 to $15,000 on an elopement versus you can spend $10,000 on a venue easily. So it's like you save a ton of money eloping. And what's great is you can make it as affordable or as expensive as you want. Whereas like I think with big weddings, you can kind of do the same thing. It just, I mean, the venue to me is like the kind of meat and potatoes of a wedding. And so if you can't find a cheap venue that you like, you're kind of stuck, investing a ton of money into your venue.
Venue, no, and I would say that I think venue, and it's really windy here. Sorry, venue rentals have really gotten out of control, and the point where like even by the time you rent that, like maybe you don't have a videographer, maybe the floral isn't up to the budget because you end up cutting a lot of things because of that. And I think
Yeah.
almost in the hindsight, then like the weddings there maybe don't look as expensive when like all the money went to the venue, and then we have no money left over to kind of fill that space or decorate that. And obviously there's beautiful venues where you don't need to do a lot of that, but like I'll see photos come back or like photographers I'll talk to where it's like, yeah, it was me in the venue, and then the friends were catering, the friend DJ, they did this, they did that, and like it just doesn't look like what they thought because so much 50% of the budget was tied into just walking in the door.
Yeah, and that's honestly like what happened with me and my husband's wedding is we spent so much money on our venue. My husband really wanted a videographer, but we just couldn't afford it. And I look back and it's just like honestly probably my biggest regret of my wedding is not hiring a videographer because they're just I mean they tell a story so differently than a photographer does and it's so much more to me like emotional and heartfelt and just it's just a different experience. And so I think, anytime couples ask me, what was your biggest regret of your wedding? It's just like, I didn't hire a videographer because we spent all of our money towards our venue.
Oh,
So go to a cheaper venue, like get married outside. You can get married in a national park and a national forest. Like there are options. Even if you want to have a larger wedding, like national forests are great. If you have, 75 people, you can even have more than 75 people. Like there, you have options. You know what I mean?
So in terms then of kind of doing you said you go up to Alaska, the Washington, California, like are you targeting more like elopement people seeking the West Coast? Are you seeking more like targeted for different like locations you don't work? Like how do you kind of manage that?
Yeah, so well, like I said before, I love working with couples from the East Coast. So I kind of try to target them as much as possible. Basically my biggest client, like ideal client, I don't like using that word, but are couples that have never been to the Pacific Northwest before. So I market specifically for Northern California, Oregon, Washington, and Alaska. Those are the only places I shoot. I used to photograph all over the US. I did some international work, and I mean, there's no place more beautiful than the Pacific Northwest, in my opinion. Like I absolutely love it here. So I really try to market to couples who want to experience this beautiful area of the earth.
In terms of then, I guess reactions when they get the photos, when you send it back, I'm sure you hear from them and family and stuff. Like, what there's got to be kind of an exciting reaction, just because like you said, it's so unique here compared to like if you're living out in somewhere and you've never been out this way.
Yeah. Oh, and especially seeing them like the day of, seeing their reaction to visiting someplace like the whole rainforest for the first time it is my favorite part of the job, seeing their reaction to this place the first time, because I think it makes me appreciate it a little bit more because I'm just so used to going there all the time. But just seeing their reaction and them so happy and just like on top of the world is unforgettable. It's priceless.
You talk about helicopter rides and things like that. What's maybe a standout, unique experience that you've got to do
Oh,
through
that's a good
elopements?
one. Yeah, so, I photographed this elopement in Iceland, and we did, like, an off-roading tour, and then we went and hiked into these ice caves. It was, like, a private glacier ice caves tour in Iceland, and it was just, like, unreal. It was so amazing. I can't even describe how cool and unique that experience was, and, we went to a ton of different waterfalls around the island and just kind of really got to see everything Iceland is known for. It was incredible, amazing.
Do you think? Do you find your couples endurance wise to be able to do some of that stuff? Because we'll have couples even, it's golden hour here, and they're like, oh, I'm a little tired. Like, are they able to kind of fight through all that and get all the things they need to? Or I guess you're able to pace it more up to kind of their speed. But there is still that like, okay, we're done with, or like, are they kind of all in? They have to be all in on it, right?
Yeah, they're usually pretty all in, and like I said, it does depend on the couple too, so, I have a lot of couples that are super just chill and laid back, and they're just like, we want a timeline, but we kinda just wanna go with the flow. Like, I literally just shot an elopement last week in Olympic, and we were planning on going to 2 locations, but we ended up going to 4 because they were just like, "Okay, I'm kinda done here, like, let's go. Can we go somewhere else?" Like, "Yeah, of course." So, it's really up to the couple and what they wanna do.
So in terms of photography, how'd you get into all this? Was it something you went to school, or we always I grew up with a camera in my hand? Like, how'd you get involved in photography?
Yeah, so I was actually really into video first. Like
Nice.
in middle school and high school, my siblings and I would just film everything and like stitch together all of these videos and do like, TV series basically. And I ended up going to college. I really wanted to become a doctor. So I was majoring in pre med. I worked in a hospital beforehand and got my medical assisting license. And I was in college and I was just so burnt out. Like I just was not enjoying science very much. I was like, okay, I don't think I want to do this. So I need to find a creative outlet because I mean, it was just day in, day out at the library studying all day long. And I felt like I completely lost myself. And so I ended up switching my major to sociology, fell in love, absolutely loved it. And I was on YouTube one day just trying to find different hobbies to do. And I came across this video of a photographer who's taking portraits. And I was like, this looks really fun. I kind of want to try this. So I asked my husband if we could go to Target, and we had just gotten married. Like we were so young. I got married at 19. He was 20. We had no money, like completely broke. And we went to Target. We spent all of the Target gift cards we got from our wedding on a starter DSLR, a little Canon T6i. And I just started photographing portraits. And then I would just kind of advertise like $25 shoots on Facebook. And then someone reached out to me and asked if I would shoot their wedding for $300. And I did it. And it just kind of snowballed from there.
What a great story. That's so funny. Do you feel like your husband feel like that was probably money well spent at that point,
Oh,
right?
100%. Yeah, and, like, I don't know why he said yes, because if it was him asking me, I probably would have been like, "Absolutely not. We have no money." But, yeah, he had a lot of faith in me.
Well, no, I mean, but that was, I mean, I remember because I was working and we were out on, we weren't married yet, but we were out for like Valentine's Day and we were at a winery out in Woodinville. It was like talking with them and he's like, yeah, I own the winery. I have my own, I come in when I want to, I leave when I want to, I do this. And I was like, that's a really good, yeah. But my wife took the same kind of leap of faith in that way. And I'm like, I think I'm going to quit this job that I've done and went to school for and have, whatever at that point, 8 years in, like, I think I'm going to start this new thing. But no, that's good. I mean, that's what a supporting, a spouse or whatever is supposed to do, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's a very unique story, and I think everything always works out. Like, I look back at the times where I'm just like, "I don't know how we're gonna make it through." Like, we're in school, we're desperate, and everything works out, you know?
In terms of then build brand building kind of business, that side of it, because I know, and we have had all sorts of, like I do florals, but I can't do my taxes, all sorts of
Oh,
different,
yeah.
because we're all creatives, right? And everyone's kind of different strengths. Like in terms of like learning that side of things, how did you figure that out?
Oh gosh, trial and error, honestly. Like, YouTube was my best friend for figuring out taxes and all of that fun stuff, and I honestly loved the back end of the business, like, so much. I love being a business owner. I honestly love taxes and emails and all of the boring stuff that a lot of other business owners don't love. So, for me, I feel like it was just very easy. I think marketing was like I didn't know how to market myself. Like, marketing was so hard for me. I think even today it can still be one of my, low points in terms of, like, running a business, but I think everything else, like I said, just very trial and error, asking for help. I would do a lot of mentor sessions with photographers to just kind of pick their brain and see, okay, how do I do this? How do I pay my taxes? What is your business filed as? XYZ.
Well, I think it's also hard because it's a lot of like like it's just kind of your right. You can do whatever you want, but also like you can do whatever you want. Like we've been on, and I paid god awful money to like Wedding Wire, they're not, and all that stuff. I just always have, and like finally,
Yeah.
I'm like, well, I think I'm gonna like because we don't do as many weddings, we do a lot more corporate. I'm like, well, do I, and like I talk with my wife about it, but there's no like thing you pull up where you're like, what am I supposed to do? Right. It's kind of you learn or figure out like this is what I want. And then if it's the wrong decision, you might not figure out it's the wrong decision for a year from now. And then you look back and you're like that. So it is hard. It's a lot of that. But yeah, I find that where it's the freedom of being able to do whatever you want, but then also like you can do whatever you want. So there's no kind of checks and balances there.
Yeah. You hit the nail on the head. That is like the perfect way I would describe it too.
Yeah, because I don't know. I mean, it was a lot of it. And I'm like, God, and I call them. I'm like, don't. And I found like I pulled up like I'm spending so much money on this, and I'm like, I guess I kind of knew that, but then in the back of your head, and then you're like, God, you look at your bank statements, you're like this is crazy. So anyway, we're making wholesale changes here, Best Made Videos as well, but it is interesting that way. Because we kind of start rounding down the conversation here, like. I guess in terms of, I always ask wedding day, we've kind of gone through this in terms of the elopements and kind of that, but what do you want in terms of your couples coming in for their wedding day experience to kind of feel like with you?
Yeah, so I really want them to have it sounds so cheesy, but this once in a lifetime adventure. I don't know if you've ever been like on top of a mountain during sunrise and you just have this epiphany where you're just like, no, he's like, no, absolutely not. Or you're just at a place where you're just like, I feel so small. Like, this is what life is about. I feel like I'm alive. I feel like I'm living. I really want couples to experience that on their wedding day, to be like, okay, this is a memory I'm never going to forget. Like, I feel like I have lived my life today. I would be so happy if I died tomorrow because I feel like my life has been so full. Like, that's how I want couples to feel.
That's good. That's good. I mean, what they, yeah, and then get married and then die the next day. That's great. No, I'm kidding. What do you want? I guess anything else I haven't asked you that you want people to know about you, about kind of what you do or how you operate? Anything else I haven't touched on?
I don't think so. I think you covered everything.
Hey, we did a pretty good job here. So I pulled up your website before. Where would you have people check out here and the socials and kind of everything else for them to go through?
Yeah, so you can find my website at briannaparksphoto.com, and then I'm on all social media platforms at Brianna Parks Photography.
Well, this has been good. Like I said, always good to kind of meet different. We'll get rid of, I always kind of dare talk through myself here as I do all that, but great to kind of meet another photographer. Good. a whole variety of different vendors and stuff on here, but certainly good for that. Elopement's kind of expanding out for all of that. Brianna, I really appreciate it. If you're a vendor looking to get on here, and I always post with it, but bestmadevideos.com/podcast guest is a great way to kind of get involved in that. The wind is shaking the table here as I'm sure my mic is cutting out, but Brianna, it's great to meet you. I appreciate you spending some time today.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. This was awesome.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next time. I'll play the outro music here.